Do I use this? Let's see. Okay, cool. Can everyone hear me in the back? Hi in the back. Well, who here lives in Lisbon or Portugal? Very most people. Great. Who's been here more than a year? Okay. Who's been here more than 6 months? That's be included, right? Okay. Great. Well, I'm grateful to sit here and talk to you. It's the first time I've given a talk at the blog. I moved to Portugal 3 years ago. Not as early as the people who started this space, but before like a little bit of the big wave that we've had over the last few years. When I first came here, I wasn't anticipating having a crypto community in Lisbon. I thought I was getting away from crypto community. I used to live in San Francisco for 20 years. But it's been great and exciting that so many people have moved here, and now we have these big events like NIA and like this one, and all the people who live around here. It's great to have a nice community. I'm going to talk a little bit about some ideas that I've been thinking about for the last few years. I originally gave this talk at EthCC in Paris, where I kind of give a fairly regular talk each year talking about different ideas, as the gentleman here was saying, in a kind of provocative way. I'm trying to just spur some discussion, and maybe I can leave some time at the end for us to chat a bit about some ideas that I'm bringing up. I have a few images generated by DALL-E, which I just did today. This is kind of like a weird AI vision of Lisbon, maybe in the future, with kind of lots of crypto things waving around, and perhaps a sort of utopian view of things. Maybe after the recent Prime Minister resignation, we can move towards that, but we'll leave politics for later. So I was originally living in San Francisco before I got into crypto. I'm not going to say Web3 at all during this talk, so don't worry. And I was kind of on the back of a fairly long career in tech, and ended up through a series of acquisitions at a hedge fund, a place called Fortress Investment Group, which was just not the right place for me to be, but I was helping run this fund. And so I decided I was going to leave, and it was the beginning of 2013, and so I chatted to Pete Brigger, who runs Fortress, and I said, hey, I think I'm going to do something else, like going to start a company or something different. And he said, hey, you got any other ideas? And I was like, well, it's provocative, sure, I'll go back and think of another idea. So I came back a month later and I said, hey, I've got this idea, maybe we should start looking into Bitcoin. My original idea wasn't like, let's go buy a bunch of Bitcoin. It was like, let's go invest in companies that didn't exist yet, but there was some exchanges, and there's a few other people trying to do different things around payments. And coincidentally, they'd also be looking at this. So Pete Brigger and Mike Novogratz had been working on this idea of Fortress as just a sort of side gig. A couple months later, Dan Moorhead joined Fortress, and then a few months after that, we spun the whole thing out into what became Pantera Capital. So I was one of the two initial people there, and I have various pieces of NFT art. The artist is the one, very interesting generative artists. So we went off and did this thing. I sat on the board of Bitstamp for 3 years. We invested in all the other companies. We did not invest in Ethereum, interestingly enough, because there was so many. It's hard to explain. There was just so many ideas like that at the time that it was kind of hard to sort of figure out which one of these things. We definitely weren't just Bitcoin maxis, but at the same time I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. So later, I used that mistake to make sure I was much more open to newer ideas as they came along. And this is some of the companies we invested in the first fund. I think you know some of these names. It was a very different time when you could fit most of the people that mattered in crypto in this room. It was a small community, and many people I know were also from similar vintages. It's nothing like it is today. But, and this is part of the talk, is even in this sort of like fairly irrelevant, weird sort of annex of finance and tech, which didn't really make much of an impact in the world, and other than being a curiosity and some people getting rich and it being something that people got excited about to write funny news articles about, it still attracted a lot of attention from certain people, and those people were the governments and banks. And the kind of question is like, what was the point? Like, why get so excited about this thing, which a few enthusiasts have got into, and a few people made some money, but like, what was the big deal? It was not at the scale that we have today. Well, one thing that really got very excited about Bitcoin was Cyprus. So, as a result of the financial crisis, GFC in 2008, there was this like hangover of economic issues around Europe, globally sure, but for better or for worse, other parts of the world, especially the US, sort of like dealt with some of the financial crises like faster and more painfully. In Europe, we kind of dragged it out a little bit more, and there was some structural issues why that was the case. But then, when sort of like Cyprus started melting down, and it wasn't clear whether it was going to be bailout or not, or what was going to happen, suddenly at the same time, Bitcoin started shooting up. And so, whether or not it was lots of Cypriots going and buying it, whether it was just the concept that this was an issue, and the fact that you could actually have this kind of meltdown and run on banks and so on, this started happening. And there was this sort of correlation, people started looking at this thing. But during this period, also this was the world of crypto. I mean, like, this was what we were entering in Pantera, this world of like, Mt. Gox was the main exchange, and sadly we don't know what happened to that, or we think we know what happened to that. Actually, strangely enough, I actually ran into the main guy from Mt. Gox at ETC. I guess he's helping some people out on some projects. And then there was Silk Road. Silk Road was still a thing. I remember logging in, not that I used it, of course, but I remember logging in using Tor and showing people, like, look, there's this really incredible, successful website that's powered by crypto. And as a use case, of course, it's very controversial, but in terms of like the speed of success of this thing and the kind of the mechanisms that were used and the sort of the ability, like it really got you thinking. It was like, wow, you could actually build something really interesting using this kind of technology. But then things started going wrong. So in 2013 October, Silk Road was seized. In 2013 December, we had China banning crypto for the first time. They've been banning crypto successively every year since then. It's still not particularly completely banned, but it happens. And then 2014, Gox got hacked. And then all of a sudden in March, I'm sitting on the board of the largest Bitcoin exchange in the world. Like, there was nothing else, there was no other. I mean, crypto was Bitcoin and a bunch of other things that looked like Bitcoin, but everyone was good. And then something interesting happened. So, this is why I was asking whether this was recorded or not. Because I can give you two versions of the story. But let's just say that we were suddenly in a situation where there's a system in banking where there is this big global banks, of which JP Morgan is one of them, and then there's what's called, there's the smaller banks, and the big banks are effectively what are called correspondent banks. I don't know what sounds how this works, but when you want to send a wire, you're not actually sending a wire from, like, say, JP Morgan to Barclays. You're actually doing it through other people on the way, and then people kind of form this correspondent banking system. It's like it's as bad as in the relatively recent past, faxes get sent to people, sit on people's desks, and then when they read them, they type in the numbers and get sent along. Like, we're now getting better than that, but that's pretty much how wires work. So all of a sudden, Bitstamp, whose correspondent banking setup was with JP Morgan, suddenly found that they were being forced by the bank they were banking with to, like, basically shut accounts down, shut themselves down. It was like this very difficult situation. People were finding they couldn't get banked by different people if they were connected to Bitstamp. And without naming names, effectively what was happening was a global bank was coming after Bitcoin, essentially coming and saying, Bitstamp is the biggest and like really the only exchange in town that banking most everything. We're going to come after this by taking out the banking system, the platform. And this isn't conspiracy theories, this happened, right? And so back in 2013, 14, we were under attack for like basically we want to take this thing out. When, again, as I was saying, it was largely an irrelevant technology. It didn't really impact anybody. It hadn't really got global scale. It hadn't got to, it's not right yet, but it hadn't got to the point where people were talking about it on a daily basis. Most people didn't understand what it was, hadn't thought about it. It wasn't an interesting thing to talk about. But the state came after it, the governments and the banks, as I say, perhaps, but they were after it right away. So this didn't just start happening. Like, we sort of sometimes think that like, oh, it's because everything's got bigger and because of this and that, and now they're coming for us. No, they've been actually at this since back in the early part of, or at least when crypto started becoming more used. So things have happened. Again, China keeps banning us. The ICO ban, so we have this period where you could just put a website, an Ethereum contract address, and a white paper, and people start sending money. And this is this huge ICO boom, which many of you probably are involved in. We've had recently, increasingly, just extensive debanking. I know it's happened in Portugal too. If it looks like your account's connected to crypto, then you'll get a call, you're like, hey, sorry, no more, okay, you're out. And then, it's kind of like, it's like you don't even have 30 days to leave the bank. It's just like, your account is kind of shut down anyway. I have like funds that I'm involved in who've had their account shut down. And they're like, we told you we were a crypto fund. Like, what the hell's going on? Did you have that experience?
Two experiences.
Yeah.
So, like, the first bank kicked me out maybe around 2014 or something like that. It was Crédit du Nord. And then Crédit du Nord was now bought back by Société Générale, which I had another account. And after they bought back Crédit du Nord, they also kicked me in. So I guess they got me back on the credit bank. So I actually had twice from them.
Did you find a good place in the end?
No, since I was kicked out the first time, I made sure to have 3 bank accounts so that they don't all kick me out at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, now I only have 2, so I need to.
Now you decentralize. Decentralization as a security practice. And then more recently, we've got just sort of this US regulation by enforcement. We've had some relatively good news recently, much as even though I was an early investor in Ripple at Pantera, I'm not such a huge fan of Ripple versus other things, but the one thing that was good is they used their huge treasury to go up against the SEC. I think we'll see similar things happening with the Coinbase action that's happening now. I know my friend who runs legal crack, and he's like, we're just waiting for the right moment, and then we will come out with everything we've got. And so whether that works or not, we'll see. But it still doesn't diminish the fact that these guys hate us. Right? They really do. And at the same time, there are so many things to hate. We're not squeaky clean. There was a quote, I think, maybe like a Twitter thing, when we quoted Naval, but he was talking about, someone was saying, oh, if Steve Jobs was working in Silicon Valley by now, if he was still alive, he would be cancelled by now, because he's like just controversial and weird and doesn't really fit into the corporate environment. And Naval's retort was, no, he wouldn't have been cancelled by now, he would work in crypto. Because in any situation where you've got these sort of edgy technologies where there's a lot of ability to act and create and do things in a very sort of free way, that's where you find the most innovative people, the craziest people, but you also find the scammiest people. And it just goes together. Really. Kind of like in almost any situation. The early days of the internet looked like that. Poker, just like pick a subject, you'll find the sketchier people in that. But we unfortunately, it's often a kind of a meme with the crypto Twitter is like, oh, we've got to do better next time. But the next time there will be other things like this, and in some sense, I feel like it's sort of incumbent upon people like us who've been in the space for longer to say, to try to like push to do better, like to try to kind of educate people, to push to like call things out as much as we can. Unfortunately, many people don't. When the prices start rising and everything starts to go crazy, like people just look for the money, and then unfortunately doesn't always work out so well. It's tough out there right now. this is like a map of like VC funding. It isn't completely up to date. VC funding is incredibly important to our industry. I mean, putting aside fair launches and the fact that everything's a shitcoin, it's still incredibly important to have investors come in and help build things, and not help build things, but help fund things, such that entrepreneurs can get started. Not everyone can start something from scratch. Not everyone's saved a whole bunch of money in crypto can find something and just build it. And yet, you know, we go through these cycles where I'm sure in a couple of years, if this does what we hope it's going to do, go away, we'll see people piling money in at the top of the market versus what they should be doing is putting money into things right now. This is like, there's a lot of incredibly interesting things getting built right now. My personal deal flow is better than it was a year ago. It's not as large in terms of numbers, but the quality I think is a lot better. But this is sort of where we are. Right? This is what the real bull market looks like. But I mean, it's not that painful. Right? This was 2013 period, 2014-15. When we started Pantera, we were then raising money, and I put together a venture fund of, we were trying to raise 150, we raised 30. And it took like a year and a half to put the whole thing together. We just raised and deployed as we went, so we didn't see us. And we went around the world, started talking to people, and they were just like, this is just a scam. Like, I don't think this thing's even real. This Bitcoin thing just is nonsense. And there were people, sure, who believed in things, but when you went out to go trace money from LPs, they were just like, no. Now the questions are different. You know, I go talk to people, I'm raising the fund now, and it's a different conversation. Now it's more kind of like, is regulation going to get in the way? Is SAFE going to get in the way? When are you going to have some decent applications? It's more like, yeah, this is real, but how big can it be? So if you have any doubts as to whether or not I'm telling the truth, and whether this is just me with my personal bias and conspiracy theories, we have the sitting president of the United States tweeting against crypto.
Crazy.
Right? Elizabeth Warren, you know, who's basically kind of runs part of the government in the US. It's like, this stuff is real. It's not like a sub-narrative. It's not like a subtle thing. It's like very overt. And, you know, obviously we're the problem. Right? This is why. So you kind of like, in the face of all this stuff, in the face of all the fact that like a lot of people hate us, like, you know, why are we doing this? Like, there's plenty of things we could do. Like, what's the point? Like, what gets you going? And then, you know, part of it is like, a lot of people talk about building a better world, building a more utopian future, like decentralizing all things, that will be better, and so on. And I tend to agree. But like, again, it comes back to like, there's lots of reasons why you can do things. I mean, some people are here for parties. I mean, we have much better parties than we used to, just really bad parties. Now we actually have like decent parties. We have Rage, we have Bravo, we have like better music, at least in my opinion. It's like, it's fun. Maybe it's for your friends, maybe it's because you like really difficult problems, maybe it's because you're awkward and obstinate and you like to do things that people don't like you to do. Whatever it is, maybe trying to change the world, it's great. Whatever your motivation, it doesn't matter. The question is like, why is this interesting? Like, what is the power of this technology? And what, as we go into a new cycle of building and hopefully scaling this thing out to much larger markets, what's the reason? And to me, it's the core component of this stuff is decentralization. There's a lot of things that lead from that, but I always come back to that. And it's like really kind of like thing that when I look at the project or look at the team, I'm saying, do you understand why this is powerful? I understand like, if I have X or Y, if Y is more decentralized and they do represent thing, I'm going after Y. It's kind of the way to do this. I can't remember what I was going to say on this slide, but it's really cool. It's essentially this is generative photography. So Kevin takes images that he's collected and different ones he gets from a lot of his own personal work. And this was a series talking about civil uprising. And kind of the sort of, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that it's got like weird pieces to it. So it'll have 2 arms and legs and heads missing and so on. I think what I was going with this picture is just the sort of the kind of the power and the sort of uprising around so many civil movements today. Pick any piece of politics and so on. One of the things that was interesting initially with Twitter and sort of the Arab Spring when Twitter really first started getting massive reach was this idea that these more decentralized forms of media, actually I know it's Twitter centralized, but just it's a more decentralized form of media than we've seen before. The power of decentralized technologies in one of these areas is the ability to enable people to communicate without censorship, to be able to organize, to have the ability to transact without being shut down because there's a reason that the government's likely there for you. You don't get to have this bank account. It's Gary. I actually love people. It's like watching The Simpsons every day. It's like, I'm seeing you now. Clear regulations. It's often touted that in Europe we're doing better because we have MiCA and we have all these different other European regulations that come on board. Sure, but regulations that typically look backwards, they don't look forwards. We have this recent stuff around AI where it's like, I think they've chosen a certain number of tariff laws where it's like, okay, if you're less than this, you don't have to be regular. If you're more than this, you do. And it's like crazy. It's like going back to like saying you only have 48 megabytes of RAM or something, otherwise you can regulate the computer. It's just like people don't look forwards, and so regulations are naturally going to be looking backwards. It does help, sure, with funding and all sorts of other things, but one of the great adages, a friend of mine was COO of Skype, one of the other guys there, and they resisted being regulated forever. They just said, we are not a telecom. We are not a telecom communications company. We are something different. We're a software application. And because they kept pushing and pushing and pushing to not be regulated, I think eventually there was some like new kind of regulation built around for like emergency service location and so on. But the ability to actually do that for as long as possible meant that the world of VoIP and Skype and so on managed to grow and be like incredibly powerful and useful today, versus being regulated as a telephone entity and then probably getting crushed by the existing incumbents. Kind of jumping around here, but we don't really have killer apps yet, and this is like probably one of the weakest parts of the industry so far. But maybe we do. So I get this question a lot, like what is a killer app? And I actually believe we have a number of killer apps already. The first one is just Bitcoin. It's like the ability to, and related things, the ability to have an efficient store of value that's not under the control of centralized third party. Second, and this is controversial, but ICOs, whatever, like all these kind of fair launches, these are incredibly efficient mechanisms for raising money. Now, as a result, they're incredibly efficient mechanisms for having scams as well. They're like you have the extremes here. Unfortunately, they've been really kind of controversial in terms of like KYC, AML, all these kind of other issues that the state are putting on things. But as an ability to just like really concentrate funding very rapidly, we're now starting to see this happening in other areas like decentralized science and just like ways to break the kind of old boys club of Silicon Valley or like pick a region of VCs and angels. Like those groups of people really concentrate power in terms of like who gets anointed as like this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. And I think some really interesting things came out of that period. Of course, decentralized finance, which is not only has the potential to revolutionize existing financial systems, but create completely new kinds of financial primitives. And then, of course, the around digital assets and so on have already emerged and started to change and challenge and extend the existing art market, for example. I'm doing time because I should wrap up soon, but the state has like very radically different ideas for this technology. Anyone see Mr. Robot? So it's from Mr. Robot on the right side. So CBDCs, which are not decentralized, they're centralized digital currencies, but use the same kind of technology. The way they use the technology is to control people in more ways. So by making money programmable, you can decide who is allowed to buy diapers or beer. This is kind of the old example. It's like, hey, I'm going into the shop, I want to buy some beer, I want to buy some diapers. Okay, you can buy the diapers, you can't buy the beer. Right? Because you're on welfare and therefore like this money shouldn't go there. Or we don't like you in the States, so therefore you can't buy this plane ticket. And so on. So this ability to control people, and certainly that's starting to happen with credit cards and so on, but this is much more powerful as we go to understand. And then just kind of like, everyone has to have an AI slide now. This is also generated with DALL-E in like a couple of minutes. I gave a script of like, give me an image of distributed AI systems controlled in this case by kind of a centralized authority, or like in a more decentralized way. So the reason why crypto and AI is interesting is manifold, but we can talk about it later. But the thing that's dangerous here is if you thought Google and Facebook were powerful, you have no idea how powerful this stuff can be. I mean, it's like basically like giving you a conversational interface to knowledge, and being able to program against that and link that into so many aspects of people's lives. In some ways, the hype around AI is actually not really big enough for people to kind of get what's going on. And so you want to scale that concern you have over centralized control by like Facebook and Google and owning our data, and imagine if this is all centralized. And so one of the interesting things I get excited about with crypto and AI is the idea of having decentralized data stores, decentralized models, the ability to like choose and pick those things and string them together in more powerful ways. I do many things. One of the things I do is I run Orchid, and we have a decentralized VPN. VPNs are great tools for pretending you are not where you are, or shielding your internet from snoopy Wi-Fi, like you have in hotels and airports and so on. Lots of reasons why we're using a VPN. Orchid is a decentralized VPN, so it works with a network of VPN providers rather than one centralized one. And there's many stories as to why that's a good idea. This is another Dali slide. This is how you can reach me, and this is again future vision of Lisbon with lots of happy crypto people. Thanks.
Nice. Let's open for some questions.
Any questions?
Any questions?
No.
At some point, the DeFi and the CeFi needs to merge together. Don't you think? Like, how do you see that pan out? It's just going to be a constant spark between each other, trying to be like coexisting, or simply trying to ignore each other?
I mean, maybe they can exist together. Maybe they can be. You know, I personally use unless I'm playing with something that doesn't have a DeFi market, then a lot of the time my centralized exchange is just an off-ramp for when I want to get into fiat currency.
It's just that do you see that as either the merge is going to need to happen, or is it going to be like, oh, the CeFi is eventually going to take over everything, or is it the DeFi? But like, how is it going
Well, okay, maybe let's do this. So, if you take a telecommunications provider today and you rewind time like 20, 30 years, right? Completely different technology, back end now than we have then. And so, but that, you know, Vodafone or wherever it is just a front end to a technology stack that allows people to do things with cell phones and FaceTime and all these kind of things that we couldn't do 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But the technology stack is completely different. So all Vodafone is really is front end. Yeah, front end is like a person who has a relationship with the customer. So whether it's decentralized finance that has a relationship with customers, or a front end on top of that has a relationship with customers, it sort of doesn't really matter. But I do think that the plumbing will be ripped out and replaced with different things. Yeah, thank you.
Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
At the risk of having you repeat something that you already covered, what do you think about blockchains, their interaction with AI in terms of fidelity and provenance of information, and the deep fakes, and how difficult it already is, I think, to have any sort of. You're thinking about blockchains as trust as a service or tech stack. How do you think about this kind of convergence of these two techs?
Well, there's a couple of things there with recent things. So it's sort of no coincidence that OpenAI and WorldCoin have shared founders and investors. So this kind of concept of like proof of humanity, like is there a person? Yeah, thank you. Is there a person on the back end of this interaction, or is it like a thing? I don't know to what extent people use kind of some of the newer versions of ChatGPT and other AI tools that It's crazy how good it is. Everyone use the chat, the voice chat interface to ChatGPT. Yeah, so like just go for a drive, put your headphones in, and just press the headphones button on ChatGPT, and you have like full conversation. And the conversation is so good, like this feels like it's a person. And so, how do you test whether that is? So like crypto aspects of zero knowledge proofs, other cryptographic primitives that have been emerging, I think will play an important role in that kind of issue. There are other aspects which are sort of
Thinking about oracles in that context.
in what sense?
Oracles being kind of like verified sources of true information.
Yeah,
I was thinking that oracles could be increasingly important.
I think decentralized oracles I think will be important. There's some weirdness right now where people talk about, for example, you run into things like GDPR and other things where someone's like, hey, show me to what extent my data source was used in generating this output. And I think there's a misunderstanding of how networks work, or neural networks work, which is that it's just a big kind of mess of connections. No one can really go through and say, this data source is the one that outputted this thing. There are other architectures that can be built that make that easier, but there's still some sort of like muddy stuff going on. But I think the aim is the final that I put it together now is focusing on this, amongst other things, but on this intersection of these two subjects. Like, to what extent is crypto and AI that like essentially going to supercharge each other and like produce interesting applications?
We're going to keep going unless anyone else has questions. Because we have a bunch. So coming out of the tech back into markets, what do you think, like DeFi summer was the thing that really drove the last bull run. We've got the Bitcoin ETF, BTC just crossed 37,000 people. Let's give it a hand. So that's good. But like, where do you see what's driving markets? Where do you think is it gaming? Are there any macro trends that you see as being important to drive adoption in markets over this part of the cycle?
If I knew why markets were nothing about, I'd be really lost by this point. Everything's easy looking backwards, right? Global uncertainty, conflicts, maybe the Portuguese Prime Minister resigning. These are all potential reasons why people look to an alternative store of value versus keeping it in fiat currency or stocks, which are effectively linked. It's hard to say what the drivers are today. Longer term, over the next few years, I feel like, most appropriate, but touch wood. There's like, I was involved in like early kind of commercialization of the internet, early like mobile tech, kind of YouTube style environments, like mobile or social things. It was like around all of these periods, and in the run up to what everybody thought was going to happen, right? We were all like, there's going to be social network one day, like, it's not MySpace, it's not Friendster, like, what's it going to be, right? It's like we didn't know. And Facebook comes along and you're like, is that really it's going to come out of a like weird university college thing? That's the thing that's going to take over the world? Wow. It's like slightly unlikely when you looked at it at the time. I know like 4 or 5 companies I was invested in, one of competitors, and it's Facebook. And then the sort of there's this moment where you like it just all seems to like it's never going to really happen, and then all of a sudden it does. And to kind of look for these reasons as to what gets you there. The reason the first internet wave in the 1990-2000 period didn't really work is sort of like a lack of bandwidth and a lack of like technology stack that made this so easy and cheap to build. We got that later, right? But a lot of the ideas from the dot-com days that people laugh at, like buying tech people on the internet, it's like actually a great idea. People will do it all the time. But at the time, I was like super hyped and seemed like a bad idea. It wasn't actually a bad idea, it was bad time. So the question is like, a lot of people come to me and say, what's the new thesis? What's the new thing that we're going to do? I'm like, go back to 2013, when we had like a thesis back then, not much has changed. Like a lot of the things we've got like, NFTs were kind of a bit of a surprise in terms of like how fast it came up, but if you look at the digital art movement, it kind of makes sense. If you look at memes, it kind of makes sense. Okay, let's like add like cryptographic proofs. Okay, that's the market. But the I think a lot of the narrative, or the idea that's decentralized identity, like gaming, like a lot of these things there'll be one of these things that takes this thing to scale. And it'll probably look really weird at first. Like Facebook look really weird. Ethereum look really weird. Like it won't be like super obvious, like this is the thing that goes crazy. But I think that will happen, and then all the big infrastructure that we've been building out, this DeFi, all the stuff that everyone built, will suddenly seem like, wow, that was an amazing idea to invest in those things, because suddenly they're really relevant.
So bringing it back to tech, ZK proofs, where do you see the adoption in near term, and then what do you see as medium long term in terms of the impact of ZK proofs?
Near term, it makes things scale better, and I think that's a strong reason why we've had such large amount of funding and innovation going into ZK technology in the last few years. We have these challenges of scaling blockchains, and ZK is very good at doing that. So it's getting better and better, and everything's like ZK VMs, all these kind of different compatibility layers. Outside of crypto, there's a lot of interesting mechanisms there. So having a decentralized energy stack and being able to only expose certain pieces of information, so that when you want to do like boring things like KYC ML, you don't have to tell the entire life story, you just expose the information that's actually being requested. I think this will have like very profound impact on the way that people interact with governments, people interact with each other. I think that will be very helpful. A lot of like scaling and then impacting crypto and then like impact out into the rest of the world.